Arthur had promised me during our engagement that his position at a prestigious company would provide for both of us, assuring me there was no need for concern. But as soon as we were married, that promise quickly dissolved. His attitude changed drastically. Arthur and his son, Jack, began to belittle me daily. Despite my best efforts, Arthur controlled all the finances, hoarding money and cutting back on even the simplest necessities. He constantly complained, even though I was left to handle all the cooking. Eventually, I had enough. I told him I wanted a divorce and walked away from that miserable life. Not long after, I bumped into Jack. "Hey, I heard you're really struggling now," he mocked, a smirk on his face. Confused, I replied, "What are you talking about? You must have the wrong person." Jack rolled his eyes. "Don't play dumb. Don't come crying to me when you're broke, okay? I'm not giving you a dime." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, feeling the eyes of strangers on me. Before I couldn't help but laugh. Poor Jack had no idea. I couldn't wait for him to learn the truth. I'm Sarah, a 50-year-old housewife who married Arthur 5 years ago. At the time, he seemed like the perfect gentleman. We met through a mutual friend, and I was drawn to his charm and easy conversation. After our first meeting, he said, "Let's do this again, just the two of us next time," and I couldn't say no. During our courtship, Arthur shared that he had a son, Jack, from his previous marriage. Jack was a bright, happy boy, and we spent several enjoyable family dinners together. A year later, Arthur proposed. On the night he asked, I confided in him about my struggles. "You know, I still live with my parents and work part-time, right?" I began. "My first job out of college was so demanding that it ruined my health." Arthur listened intently as I spoke. "Working long hours is always tough for me," I admitted. With a warm smile, he reassured me, "Don't worry about it, just stay home and take care of yourself. My job at the company will support us both." I was relieved and overjoyed, accepting his proposal, believing I had found a kind, dependable partner. But that relief was short-lived. Within 6 months, my so-called dream life had turned into a nightmare. Once we settled into life as a family, Arthur and Jack's behavior began to change. They mocked me at every turn, belittling everything I did. "Mom, are you just lying in bed again? Where's my sandwich?" Jack demanded one morning, frowning as he entered my bedroom before school. The day before, I'd spent hours volunteering in a park, clean up under the scorching sun, and had fallen ill. I had asked Arthur for help, but he brushed me off in irritation. "Must be nice to be a housewife," he sneered. "I work all week and deserve my weekends off. Stop complaining and take care of it." The next morning, I handed Jack some money with an apology. "Sorry, Jack, I couldn't make your sandwich today. You need to buy one." Jack's face darkened. "You can't even make a simple sandwich. You're failing as a mom if you can't do that." His words stung, and Arthur overheard, piling on with, "Since you can't even manage lunch, dinner better be amazing tonight," as he passed by, chuckling. Jack added, "Yeah, I'm expecting something great." Arthur chimed in, "You've got all day to prepare it, right? And don't forget to clean up while you're at it. No slacking." They both laughed, leaving me alone with a fever, barely able to lift my head. The pressure was unbearable. How could I cook a lavish meal when I felt so sick? Arthur's tight grip on the finances only made everything harder. Despite earning a solid salary as a section chief at a major company, he gave me a tiny budget. "It's my salary," he would say. "Why should you handle it?" I reluctantly agreed, thinking it didn't matter who managed the money. But Arthur's spending habits were reckless, splurging on himself while pinching pennies for the household. "It's necessary for work," he would justify, buying expensive clothes or drinks. Yet if I purchased anything for myself, even a simple snack, he'd frown. As a housewife, I wasn't even allowed an allowance, and had to beg for permission to get a haircut. "One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it?" he would complain. "Buy them at the cheapest store." When I asked for a salon visit every couple of months, he scoffed. "What's the point? Keep your hair long and trim it twice a year. I won't allow anything else." Even my skincare was dictated by his stinginess. Cheap makeup irritated my skin, but he refused to listen. Our living expenses were ridiculously low, and making it all work while still preparing balanced meals felt impossible. When I mentioned the rising cost of living, he raised an eyebrow. "People on TV live on less. "Figure it out," he commanded. The final straw came when my father passed away. I wanted to send a proper wreath to the funeral, but Arthur's reaction was one of complete disdain. "Why waste money on that?" he grumbled. "It's not necessary." Overwhelmed, I snapped. Arthur had been distant during my father's funeral, and my relatives couldn't hold back their anger. "Arthur, what's going on here? Your wife's father just passed away, and you're acting so cold. Jack, you've received so much from Sarah's father, gifts, allowances, you should have some respect," they scolded. I apologized to my relatives, but deep down, my love for both Arthur and Jack was rapidly fading. Arthur, always looking so sharp in his designer suits, and Jack, a charming university student admired by the neighbors, had become masters of cruelty behind closed doors. They'd come home late from work or school, often smelling like perfume and lipstick, their time spent away from home as free as they pleased. Yet, they treated me as nothing more than a maid, demanding extravagant meals on a shoestring budget. When I'd serve them simple dishes like chicken or pork, their reactions were nothing short of scornful. "Is this what you consider food for your husband? You've got to be kidding me," Arthur would complain. "If I get sick from this, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mother?" Despite my efforts to make every meal as delicious as I couldn't escape their criticisms. I tried to explain, "You can't keep rejecting vegetables and fish. That kind of picky diet will catch up with you." Arthur snapped back, "I'd eat if it were quality food. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you." At first, they'd still eat, albeit while complaining, but soon, the food went untouched. If I didn't cook, the accusations would fly. "Are you slacking off, even though you're a wife?" I ended up eating the leftovers the next day, always with a lump in my throat, wondering who I was even cooking for. Meanwhile, Arthur and Jack ate store-bought sandwiches and instant noodles. Then, the inevitable happened. Arthur was diagnosed as pre-diabetic during a company health check, and Jack started putting on weight. But instead of taking responsibility, they turned their anger on me. "What kind of wife makes her husband and son sick with poor meals?" they yelled. "We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce." I calmly packed my things. "Fine, I'll leave." They were taken aback by my nonchalant response. "Are you sure? You're unemployed? You've been living off me. How will you survive now?" I simply answered, "Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign. Please leave my belongings until the movers come to pick them up." Arthur sneered, "No one's taking your stuff. You'll regret leaving a handsome, high-earning guy like me. I gave you a comfortable life as a housewife, with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right?" Jack chimed in, "Yeah, you've been living off Dad's money all this time. You're going to struggle now." As I packed my suitcase, I couldn't help but envy Arthur's overconfidence. When we were dating, I had mistaken it for self-assurance. "You'll just go back to your parents, right? Tell your pensioner mom I said hi. You two will be heading straight to poverty," Jack mocked. I couldn't help but laugh to myself. They already smelled of poverty. The funeral they attended had a distinct smell to it. Wasn't one of respect, but of shame. Arthur added, "I thought it was like that, just a poor family's funeral." Jack grinned, "Got it, Dad. But for someone who works at a big company like you and me, attending a prestigious university, poverty is something we'll never understand." Their words stung, but I chose not to respond. It wasn't worth my energy. When I returned home and spoke to Mom, she lowered her voice, clearly upset. Seeing Arthur and Jack at the funeral, I felt something wasn't right, but I didn't want to interface too much in your household. I was so focused on your father's care. "I'm sorry for barging in like this," she said. "It's okay, Mom. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here?" I offered. "Thank you, but once I get my job on track, I plan to move into an apartment," she replied. I understood. Living together might make me too dependent, but I could visit her often. Arthur and Jack had mocked me for being unemployed, but in truth, I had been working from home. What started as a blog posting budget-friendly recipes had blossomed into a full-fledged cooking website. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and soon I was contacted by an editor from a major publisher to write a cookbook. I was too busy to even think about the divorce, and the days passed in a blur. One day, while I was stirring ingredients on the stove, My phone rang repeatedly. I sighed and answered it. Hello. Hey, what's this about a deposit for the divorce trial? Arthur's voice came through. I sighed again. You and Jack were both relentless with your abuse. Oh, Arthur said, clearly taken aback. I thought, never mind. He sighed, relief evident in his tone. I didn't cheat or anything, you know. I couldn't help but scoff. Did you think I recorded everything? My memory is more than enough to hold you accountable. I've written everything down in my diary. Really? Poor people and their obsession with money. Arthur sneered. You are frugal, but if you want the deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead. Arthur hung up angrily, and I finished cooking, before heading to a detective agency to dig into his background. It wasn't long before I uncovered his affair with a subordinate. The next day, I sent the photos and investigation report to his company. Arthur called me again. You spreading this at work is low. The manager found out and reported it to the higher-ups. Now I've been fired. Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? You knew they were strict about that kind of thing. I laughed. But you should have no trouble, right? With all your savings, you must be set. Jack moved into a dormitory officially. I knew from Dad's will that the inheritance would be mine, but I chose to delay the paperwork until after the divorce. I wasn't about to share it with Arthur. That's when Jack, clearly frustrated, shouted, a rich woman like you getting the inheritance. I'll report you to the authorities. Go ahead, I replied coolly. It's not me, but Arthur. Who's getting it? Jack went quiet. What I told you last time still stands. It's not me, I said, treating him like a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I'm fine. I have my cooking site and side business with books. But Arthur, he spent all his money on his affair, and now he's buried in debt. Once his affair came out and he lost his job, his income stopped. Are you listening? Dad's on TF now. No way, Jack screamed, making me pull the phone away from my ear. After a few moments, I continued, didn't know that? Arthur's too proud to admit it. According to relatives he begged for money from, he's behind on rent and facing eviction. He's holed up in an old apartment. If you're really worried, why don't you contact him? A long silence followed before Jack spat. You're cold-hearted. After everything Dad did for you, you can't even help him. If you have money, why not give some to Dad? Why should I? I shot back. Since the start of our marriage, all it's been is disappointment. I don't feel indebted. If you're so concerned, why don't you lend him money? You've got a part-time job, right? I don't have savings. Jack suddenly became defensive. The part-time pay just goes to hanging out with my friends. I smirked. Living large for a student. Blowing cash at clubs isn't wise. How do you know that? Jack demanded. The other day, I saw you across the street. After we parted ways, you met a girl at a club and went shopping together. You also left a club membership card at my place, and used my credit card without permission. That's unfair, Jack cried. You got those high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination. Sure, I said. The credit card bill will be coming soon. Make sure you pay it. Before I could finish, the call was abruptly cut off. I sighed and ended it. A few months later, Arthur and Jack showed up at my parents' house unannounced. The doorbell rang nonstop, and when I answered, there they were, expecting they came to borrow money. I let them in to avoid making a scene. Arthur and Jack, who used to dress so well, now looked completely different, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty pants, their faces gaunt and hollow, but they still had the nerve to be sarcastic. Arthur sneered as he looked around the living room. Same old house. Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and fix this place up? Do something nice for Mom, living off her pension. This is Dad's house, and we're perfectly happy here, I said firmly. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're overdue. Arthur lifted his chin arrogantly. Sarah, I'll forgive you for the divorce if you come back. I heard you started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work. Come back. Jack chimed in. What a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned him. Mom, why not live with Dad again? Just the two of you must feel insecure. I was silent for a moment before fury bubbled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much longer do you plan to ridicule me? I shouted at Arthur and Jack. leaving them stunned. After treating me like nothing but a housewife, abusing me, refusing to provide for me, and then kicking me out. No, you want me back because you found out about the inheritance. Not happening. What? You're going to abandon us? Jack yelled. Rich people are so stingy. You know we're struggling, and you still demand payment. Heartless. You were poor not long ago. Don't get cocky. At that moment, Mom returned from shopping. Immediately, Arthur and Jack started flattering her. Please lend us some money, they begged. We'll probably pay you back. Besides, isn't it unfair that Sarah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see, Jack added.